Hello, good evening, viewers, and welcome to another very important, very special edition of Good Evening Ghana. Tonight we are here at the La Palm Royal Beach Hotel because just an hour ago, something significant happened. Something of monumental levels in news and current affairs production has happened here. An important partnership has been struck between Metro TV and BBC Focus on Africa. You might have heard BBC Focus on Africa on radio, but the good news now is that BBC Focus on Africa is going to be on television, and Metro TV is partnering with BBC to bring that to you every weekday from the 18th of June at 7 o'clock. So we are here talking to the architects, some of the key architects behind this event. And for us, the most important and a sense and a point of pride for us in Ghana is that our own Komla Dumor is the lead presenter of this program. And Komla has joined me here to talk about it. We're also joined by Solomon Mugera, who is the editor of BBC Focus on Africa. First, Solomon, you are the visitor in Ghana. The culture is to welcome the visitor first. Yeah, so Akwaba, as we say, and thank you for coming. Yeah, and thank you for coming, Komla.
It's good to see you again, Paul.
We used to call him the boss player, you know, back in the day. Yeah, the boss player.
What does that mean? Boss player?
The boss. He's the boss, you know.
And the player?
The microphone.
Ah. Yeah, I play music.
You play.
Okay, so after the break, we will talk about what this program will bring to us, and we will talk about how exciting it will be. And of course, we have two important Africans, young Africans with me in the studio. So we'll take time to talk about some of the socio-economic and political matters about Africa. I'll be back. Thank you very much. If you are just joining us, we are having an interview with the BBC crew, including our own Komla Dumor tonight, because they have just launched here in Ghana a partnership between Metro TV and BBC Focus on Africa as a television program, new television program, half-an-hour package for the African continent and for an African purpose. Solomon is here with me with Komla. Solomon is actually an editor at the BBC, and Komla will be the lead presenter. Solomon, tell us about this program and the thinking that went behind it, was the concept and all of that.
The thinking that went behind BBC Focus on Africa was based on the needs of the audience itself, because the BBC has got a long-standing relationship with its African audience. It dates back to over 80 years, during which millions of Africans have been tuning into the BBC radio every week. You know, we are talking about a figure which is over 77 million Africans tuning into BBC programs every week. And that has gone on for many years. There are times you feel that you cannot talk about the BBC without mentioning Africa. And I think when you talk about Africa and the media development on this continent, there's no way you'll escape mentioning the BBC. And I think the listeners will bear with me if I say that Africa is the heartland of the BBC. Why? Nowhere else do you find an international broadcaster boasting the kind of audience figures I'm talking about. Nowhere else do you find a broadcaster having invested in the manner in which the BBC has. For example, we have production centers in Africa in 3 key cities: Nairobi, Abuja, and Dakar. And now Johannesburg is going to follow. We have correspondents in nearly 48 African countries. There are nearly about 60 of them. These are just African journalists working for the BBC, leave alone those who are working in those production centers I have mentioned. So when you look at the amount of commitment the BBC has for Africa, it tells you something about the way BBC values Africa. Without Africa, sometimes it will be difficult to see the present and the future of the BBC. Now, we said BBC has been strong on radio in Africa, but things are changing. People are moving towards other platforms to consume media content. We are seeing television viewing expanding from a paltry 1 million a couple of years ago. Now you're talking about nearly 100 million people having access to television. Those are the ones who can buy a TV set. How about those who will be able to watch TV via their mobile phones? They're going to be millions. Why? At the moment, nearly 750 million Africans have got a mobile phone through which they can access all manner of content. So the BBC has been strategically thinking, how do we then make our service available to Africans who may not get us on radio, or they may want us also on television? Let's go into television. That is why. I know there'll be a lot of things to talk about as we go along, but I'll just leave it at that, just to say it was a strategic decision.
Why is the BBC so interested in Africa? I mean, what's the point?
I've just said about the long-standing relationship the BBC has had with its African
What benefit does the
audience.
BBC get from being so interested in Africa?
First-
Spreading its footprints everywhere in Africa.
Yeah,
What's
first
the
of all, is to
benefits
look
to
at
BBC?
first of all is to look at the audience and why does the audience go to the BBC. The BBC has got that purpose to serve as a source of information and to play those public roles of, number one, educating, informing, and of course entertaining. But now there's something else which has come on top of that, that is empowering through interactivity, providing platforms through which the audience can interact with you, the broadcaster, and amongst themselves. And this is why we are seeing the growth of social media, and thanks to the internet, which is making that possible. So number one is to look at why Africans themselves have been tuning to the BBC, and you'll find 1,000,001 reasons, because the reasons that drive Ghanaians to listen to the BBC may be similar or not to the reasons why Somalis tune into the BBC. In a country like Somali, the BBC plays a role of nearly what you would call a national broadcaster, because the infrastructure in that country is near to non-existent, and they trust the BBC. Earlier on, when we were doing the presentation for the launch, we had somebody mentioning Liberia, and where people in Liberia, for example, live on BBC as a key source of information. Why? Because they found it trusted. It was the only source of information at a particular period of time. And they believe in the qualities of BBC of providing news in an impartial way. So people come to us for various reasons, but underlying those reasons are the values of impartiality, objectivity, and independence. Independence is a key one, Paul. We are independent from any political or commercial influence, and that enables us as BBC journalists to perform our duties without fear or favor.
It's very difficult for me to interview Komla. You know, I've had so many formal conversations with him, but I'll try, viewers. I'll do my best.
Boss player.
Yeah, it's very difficult to have a formal interview with him. But let me ask you, Komla. You know, BBC Focus on Africa. It's, as he talked about, impartiality and also getting into the nook and crannies, talking to rebel leaders in very difficult circumstances. It's easy to do that with radio, but how will television be able to bring that to the viewers?
Well, I think what's great about this program is that it's building on the resources and the kind of relationships that have been established already through Focus on Africa on radio. So it's quite possible that some of the people that you've heard on Focus on Africa on radio have already received the training to do television. So those relationships that they have built over the years, the kind of credibility that Focus on Africa as a program has built over decades, I should say, we're building on that. It's, the programs have the same name. They have their differences, obviously, because of the production style and differences between television and radio. But I think Focus on Africa on television is a continuation of what has been established on radio, and obviously with several different platforms, the way in which multimedia interaction has virtually exploded. Focus on Africa will also be closely involved in establishing another platform for Africans to express their views, their thoughts, their concerns about what they see on television.
So what's the format of the program?
I mean, it's a news and current affairs program, and to try and explain how this works out, I'll refer to some of the other things that I've done. I mean, I've been presenting Africa Business Report, a television program, for about 2 years. Roughly 20 countries, different countries, doing business stories and entrepreneurial stuff. I've also presented Focus on Africa on radio and Network Africa on radio. And so now, if you're bringing all these things together, obviously, television has its own style, as you've done radio and television before. So you know that in preparing for or putting together a television program, there's a slightly different approach as to what you would do with radio. We're going to have news. We're going to have current affairs. We're going to take it the same way. If there's a big story,
are you going to have correspondents?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Correspondents in Nigeria.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, that's what I was saying, that some of the people you've already heard on Focus have been receiving a lot of training. Have been preparing for this. You will physically see them in their environments where the story is, providing context. I think that's what a lot of people want. They want to see the context of the story, not whether or not it's it's quote unquote a good news story or a bad news story. They want context, a full understanding of what the issue is, and those correspondents are not only talented BBC correspondents; they are talented Africans BBC correspondents. So they have a very good understanding of the nuances involved in telling a story and what really is important. Those kernels of information that otherwise you would not get if you weren't listening to someone
what's your role? You are
there.
the anchor who's going to connect everything
That is
together.
correct.
So you will be speaking from where?
From London. I'll be based in London a lot more than I have been over the past 2 years, which is something that I'm looking forward to. But yes, my role is to present the program and to bring together all the different strands of the stories and engage the audience in a way in which is compelling and drives more interest in the program.
You talk about the African correspondence and the African talent and all of that.
Yes.
Are we at a new epoch? Is the BBC arriving at a new epoch where they are trying to shred off the criticism about international media being interested in the negative stories about Africa, and therefore they are putting Africa to the forefront of the story, so that people will see the genuineness about their intentions? Is that what we are seeing?
Well, Paul, I'll say this. People will always have criticism of anything they see. People criticize local broadcasters as well as international broadcasters. And some of that criticism is fair. Some of it is legitimate. Some I would disagree with. The BBC has never had an agenda, as some people would believe, to, if you like, paint Africa black or make Africa look bad. I mean, such a conspiracy would have to involve Africans from different countries, all of us working together to serve an agenda that would be destructive of the place that we all come from, and that's simply not the case. I think, there are people who can legitimately say that the African story needs to be told differently and needs to be told better. And I think that if you consider that the African audience is the single largest audience that the BBC has. And if you consider, again, in my own experience traveling across the continent, it's changing socially, it's changing politically, it's changing economically. The old ways of telling the African story have to change with it as well. And so whether or not people criticize or point fingers, this is a program whose time has come. So the response really is to the fact that Africans, obviously are more sophisticated in terms of the demand, what they want to see on their screens, and we're responding to the needs of our viewers and not trying to set some new agenda for the continent.
So when you set up to do a production, what will be the top story if you were doing a production from say, Ghana today? There's been a big case in the court where a gentleman who's received some judgment debt. The court has paid him some money apparently for some work that he did, and he sued government, etc., etc. It's become a big political issue, and so that's one of the big stories today. We are still looking at committees set up to investigate plane crash, and also committees set up to investigate the embarrassing power failure at the football game on Friday, the World Cup qualifier between the Black Stars and Lesotho. But we also have the great stories about cocoa production has gone to 1 million tons, and the Bank of Ghana has issued a bond for 200 million Ghana cedis, which would be something like $140 million. So if you set up today, for instance, to do a BBC production on Ghana, tell me what the priorities will be.
It may be difficult for me as an outsider to come in and do what we've always been accused of. You parachute into a country as a foreign journalist, and all of a sudden you become an expert. So I will not pretend to be an expert on what will be the lead story, because what you've just mentioned to me, there's a corruption case there, and I'm hoping that it's been resolved so that we don't end up being accused of being in contempt of court, discussing matters which are still in court and passing an opinion on them. That would be something we wouldn't want to do. And then you've spoken about the cocoa production, which is increasing, and the plane crash, of course, investigation still going on. All these stories are valid stories. When you look at them, there are incidents that have happened and the things which Ghanaians will be interested in, but we want to look at them beyond just Ghanaians.
Precisely.
We want to say the plane crash, what happened here at the airport, at the Kotoka International Airport, is it something which would interest? How do we report it so that somebody beyond the borders of Ghana can be interested in and understand the story better than just hearing, oh, there was a plane crash, the pilot is to blame, or that airline has got a dodgy track record, before we even say why it's a dodgy track record. Is it dodgy at all? We need to find out by establishing the facts. Cocoa production, if indeed the production has increased, what does this mean? for the chocolate industry worldwide. You know, cocoa production in Ghana is no longer a Ghanaian story. This is an international story. What does it mean for those who consume chocolate when they this kind of news? What does it mean for the cocoa farmer? What does it mean for those civil societies that front for fair trade? To know that the cocoa farmer is getting the fair share of returns from their effort. The corruption case, it may look like a local story, but we need to look at various other strands. Who else is involved in this saga? Are they people with international connections or regional connections? Are they doing business elsewhere? So it's a holistic approach to one issue, giving that comprehensive approach that would make a difference in the way I would develop a running order for my bulletins.
After the break, we'll look further at the context and the content of BBC Focus on Africa coming up on television across Africa, but on Metro TV from the 18th of June, 7 o'clock each night, Monday to Friday. After the break, we'll continue the discussion, but we will also talk about other African stories. Of course, we'll talk about Gaddafi and what's been happening in the Libyan airports over the last 2 days. We'll talk about the Reverend Charles Taylor, who is now going to be in jail in London for the next 50 years. That's another important African story. We'll look at perhaps the new constitution in Kenya, elections in Ghana, etc., after the break. Welcome back to the program. Thank you very much for staying with us. This is still Good Evening Ghana, talking about Focus on Africa and their partnership with Metro TV. Right here with Komla Dumor, who is the presenter of the program, and Solomon Mugera, who is the editor of BBC Focus on Africa. Well, gentlemen, let's come back to the content again. And Komla, perhaps I'll give you the opportunity to have a take on the content, looking at all of what is happening in Ghana, probably say Nigeria. Would you, with all the criticism behind your mind, would you shudder to pick a negative story? Would you definitely go and look for a positive story? Or would you just behave like a newsman where the bad news is news?
Well, Paul, for me, I think, and for every BBC journalist, I mean, you know, and I suppose our viewers are familiar with the kind of background I had before I joined the BBC. When I joined the BBC, the first thing I did was a course called Broadcast Journalism 1. Everybody does that course. You do 1, then you do 2, so that we all start at the same basic level. Certain level when in regards to ethics, with regards to objectivity and balance. These are things that the BBC cherishes. And I think that runs through what everybody does. So whether it is me or it is Solomon or it is anybody else, the approach to stories should be the same. And the idea is this story a compelling story? Is this something that has an impact, not, and in the case of Focus on Africa, not just on the country that it's occurred in, but across the continent? For me, the goal is to achieve balance. So whether a story may look negative to somebody, when people say this, I say, what do you mean by negative? Is it that you mean people are suffering, and are you saying that people suffering does not deserve coverage? If 4 million people are facing starvation in the Horn of Africa, don't tell that story because it makes me feel uncomfortable. I often challenge people with that kind of situation. If people are caught, civilians are caught in conflict, and men, women, and children are dying in you know, horrific circumstances, are you saying then, or don't tell that story because I would rather hear about you know,
President Charles Taylor criticized the BBC in this manner. He said that he's the legitimate government of Liberia, and the BBC was interviewing rebels, and he thought that was picking on the negative. What would you have said to him?
Oh, well,
he said that then, in those days, when he turned down an interview of the BBC here in Accra during the Liberian peace talks, and he said he would not talk to the BBC. When the question was put, he said because they talk to the rebels who are illegitimate. He's the legitimate government. Is that negative, talking to rebels?
Well, you know what, I'm not really in a position to, you know, to comment on the validity of what Charles Taylor has to say. I mean, he has significant challenges ahead of him. But perhaps listeners will recall, and I say listeners because Charles Taylor was quite regular on Focus on Africa on radio at the time when he was a rebel. And so, you know, those comments, I suppose, once you know, put in context, that people can draw their own conclusions as to the legitimacy or the validity of it. But, you know, I think the greater question you're asking is, you know, is the BBC open for criticism when it comes to regards to the question of negative story? And I keep bringing us back to this. What really is negative? Is it something that you would rather not see? Or is it that there's not enough context being provided, or there's not enough of a balance of other stories about other things that are happening in Africa? And that's why a program like Focus on Africa is so important, because yes, if there is a very traumatic and difficult story to tell, and I've been involved in some myself, I think those stories need to be told. But yes, at the same time, there are fascinating things that are happening in the financial sector in Africa, culturally and socially, what's happening with social media on the continent. I've had the pleasure of covering many of those stories with Africa Business Reports for television, and elements of that will definitely feature in a Focus
What
on
about
Africa.
the point of BBC would not go to, say, Equatorial Guinea until something breaks out there?
Well,
they don't say anything about Equatorial Guinea until something happens. Something negative happens. I mean, the soldiers have been shooting in the barracks at 3 o'clock. 7 minutes ago, the army commander came on radio to assure people that the government is still in charge. That's the only time we'll hear about Guinea, Bissau, something like that. Is that negative?
No, you mentioned Equatorial Guinea, but let's also look at how and why BBC is present in the countries it is in, either via reporters or via production facilities like the ones I mentioned in Abuja, Nairobi, and Dakar, Johannesburg. A government must be willing, first of all, to allow in journalists who are not their own citizens, and they must then allow them to operate freely. So if I want to go to report from Equatorial Guinea and I cannot be licensed to operate there as a journalist, it becomes difficult to have a presence in that country. So number one, we can only be present in a country where, number one, we are there legally. They allow us to operate and operate freely. If we cannot operate freely, then even if you've allowed us in that country, but you cannot allow us to operate freely, we have no business being there. Because what's the point of being muzzled as a journalist? Now, the other thing which Komla alluded to when he was talking about negative news or good news is the context. Use the word providing context. It's important. Why? We need to explain to people why certain things happen. The famine in Somalia and the Horn of Africa, we need to tell people, yes, 4 million people are facing starvation. We are seeing mothers, children walking hundreds of kilometers in search of food or somewhere they can get help. Why have they been brought to where they are now? Who is responsible? What is responsible? We've heard this story before. Are we going to hear it next year or 2 years down the line? What needs to be done? So it's up to the BBC and journalists, local journalists as well, or regional journalists, to challenge these things, to find out what is the cause behind these things that we label negative, and how can they be avoided.
What about being critical of important institutions like the IMF and the World Bank? Let me probably start with you, Komla. Many Africans are very critical of the IMF and the World Bank and its policies, including African politicians and former politicians. Is the BBC able to weigh into that criticism, for instance, when there's a legitimate
It's not the
need to do
BBC's
so?
job to criticize. The BBC provides a platform for balanced engagement. And so if there are people who object to the role of the IMF, you've probably seen them objecting on the BBC. You've probably heard their voices on Focus on Africa or Network Africa or The World Today. The BBC provides a platform for people to engage. And so those who perhaps believe that the IMF is the greatest thing since sliced bread, well, they're going to have their say as well. We provide an opportunity for all opinions and for all beliefs to express themselves. And so in terms of whether or not the BBC takes a position, absolutely not. We don't take a position. We just provide an opportunity for people who do have positions.
But do you provide it in a
them.
balanced way? Do you provide the
Oh, I
people
think
who are
so.
singing the praises of Gaddafi, do you give them the same platform as the NATO that is attacking Gaddafi?
I think even by the training that we receive and even those basic courses, I mean, there are times when we are at pains to find a conflicting view. And if we do not find one, or often when, you know, a government or an individual is unwilling to respond, we are obliged to say that we did reach out to Mr. X, Mr. Y, or government X or Y, and they gave us either this response or they declined to respond, so that people understand that we didn't just, come out to say, Paul, what do you think of Solomon? And they said, well, Solomon, how do you respond to that? Well, there's an obligation to provide that kind of balance, and I think we do a pretty decent job at that.
And nobody can claim responsibility for what we do as BBC. For example, when Charles Taylor laments that the BBC is covering rebels who are not legitimate, it's not asked to legitimize rebels or leaders.
But why are you talking to them? They are not. They've not been elected. That's the government of Liberia.
Different view. It's a matter of providing a platform for various views on an issue. If they're providing a different view, so be it, and then we leave the audience to judge.
But should they have a view? I mean, if I stand up today and go on a one-man demonstration against the government of Ghana, then I'm pointing to certain things, you would probably give me a platform, wouldn't you?
Well, maybe because it's you, Paul Adom-Otchere, and given the influence that you have across the country, it would be a relevant story that Paul is on a one-man demonstration.
And then the government will come against you and say that, why are you talking to
No,
that
it will
guy?
say, no, well, the government may choose to, again, given the depth of your reach across Ghana, but then, the response always is that we want to have balance. And so if Paul has a one-man demonstration and everyone is watching and it's a serious issue which is affects all Ghanaians, look, you may be the star of the day, but you will hear from the government as well.
So how do you approach something like elections in Ghana? There are two main political parties. There are other political parties who may not necessarily accept that the two parties are the main parties. You have 230 members of parliament, you have an electoral commission, how are you going to approach something like that?
Well, I mean, if it's talking about the Ghanaian election, I've had the opportunity to cover them. In fact, our first coverage, our first job together on a political event was the Ghana elections in the year 2000. And if you ask me what kind of approach, I don't think you have to reinvent the wheel. You want to get as much as possible. You want to hear from as many parties as possible. But I suppose what is most important is to hear from the people who eventually are going to vote. So I mean, I don't want to bore you with the technical details of how many people will deploy and where we'll want to be. That's something that those are actually minor details. I think what is important is that we hear from as many voices as possible. And people say, oh well, there are several political parties in Ghana. Yes, we'll try and give everybody a fair shake, but even in the United States, there are several political parties, but there are two main ones who ultimately will determine the outcome of the vote, and I think everyone recognizes
Let's talk about
also the issues of the day. What is it that's on people's minds? What are Ghanaians wanting to talk about? What makes them really hot under the collar? What makes them have those sleepless nights? What makes them want to go out on the streets and demand things? We want to dig into those issues. Is it education? Is it health? And what is the state of health in this country? The state of infrastructure in this country? Now we hear, of course, petrodollars about to begin pouring in, and people would be wanting to see evidence of that money. Where is it going? Is it going in their schools? Are they going to see an improvement in health facilities in this country? Are they going to see improvement in infrastructure? For example, and this is not just limited to Ghana or Accra. It rained here this morning.
Did it, yeah?
Okay, and just driving along some of the roads, they're already flooded, showing that there's a problem with the drainage system. And you see this in Dar es Salaam, you see this in Nairobi, you see this in Kampala, in many African cities. You see immediately there's a downpour. Already roads almost become impassable. Why? What is it? We need to find out the cause of these things. And when we ask these questions, when we challenge those in authority demanding answers, then they say either they make themselves unavailable, or they say, oh, the BBC is only wanting to report about broken drainages that don't work. This is negative news.
I see.
And it's interesting that Ghanaians themselves are talking about those issues. It's something that concerns Ghanaians as well. And we always have, I know there's that saying that you know, if you don't train a child properly, it's when visitors come that the child will misbehave, you know, that kind of thing. But the truth is that we are telling stories that Ghanaians themselves are interested in, and if it's a matter of public services,
So it's a public interest in your day.
yeah, I mean,
that's what we've been doing for a long time.
it can definitely not be our private interest, because otherwise,
Or a political interest.
or else our show would be be
Or a neo-colonial
the black stars.
An imperialist interest.
Yeah, well, those are the words that you hear sometimes,
yeah.
but you know.
Yeah.
Look here, I'm Solomon from Kenya, an
Yes.
African. Komla
Is
an
a
African,
Ghana, yeah.
You may get an opportunity to work for one of these international broadcasters. Will you have become an imperialist?
No, I wouldn't be. Okay, let's talk about sports. This is important for all of us. Will that find space on your program?
Oh, absolutely. Sports will be presented by Adom-Otchere, one of our colleagues, who, again, people will be familiar with that name because he presents Focus on Africa. It's going to be a very exciting year for sports. The Olympics is coming around, and of course we have our World Cup qualifiers that have begun. And you know, when you consider that the Premier League, which is
The English
Premier League, which you know, is something that Ghanaians and indeed all Africans follow quite religiously, the performance of African players has been simply stellar this year, and you know, our sports journalists have very strong relationships with them. I mean, if you consider that one of our former sports journalists is now the communications director of the Ghana Football Association, you know, I think it also says something good about the quality of the journalists that we produce. Yaum Pufankra also, you know, and so they're people who Ghanaians can relate to. But the fact of the matter is that sports is a big part of what we do as Africans, and it's a big part of what the BBC covers as a network, and there will be a very strong presence of African sports on Focus on Africa.
So if I miss the program on Metro TV, where else can I get it?
It will of course be on BBC World News, which will be available on DSTV here. Or if you've got a satellite link, you can watch BBC World News. And
Is it on the same time, 7 o'clock? Do you know?
It will be at half an hour early.
Okay.
Again, it's a matter of synchronizing the
Yeah,
times
yeah.
that Metro TV wants that bulletin, because it's going to be transmitted to other destinations as well.
Yeah.
And remember, it's a global program.
Yeah, it's not just being broadcast to the African audience,
Yeah.
it's a global.
It will be watched in China, in
Yeah.
India, in Brazil, in America. And this is why, Paul, this is why this partnership gets sweeter. In the sense that a report on Metro TV doing a fantastic story here that we feel needs an international outing and exposure. We'll be on BBC Focus on Africa as part of that half-hour program being beamed internationally. What does that do to our own talent here? It showcases them that, look, who would have known this report on Metro TV could do such a sterling job? So again, you're looking at this partnership as a source of opportunity to showcase our talent.
And don't forget, it's on every weekday.
Every weekday, Monday to Friday, yeah.
So you miss it on Monday, Paul. You
can
better
see it
watch it on
Tuesday. But it's not a repeat edition, it's a new
No,
edition.
they're new daily live editions
Yeah,
of this program.
Komla said you can never have yesterday's news
Right,
today.
you can-
But are you going to
yeah.
have exclusive interviews? Are you, the presenter, going to have an important
yes.
interview? Assuming the inquiry, Leveson inquiry says that Tony Blair did something against the British people of Africa.
Yeah, well, if there's a strong connection to an African story,
you're
I
gonna do
suppose we will, because it's
Or you're going to have
focused on
Charles
Africa.
Taylor's lawyer, Conor Griffiths, who's been talking a lot to the BBC.
Oh, yeah,
Are
why
you going to
not?
have exclusives as well? Because
You
you
know
have
what?
half an hour.
You know what? Let me put it this way. Would any other program want an exclusive that represents the content or the editorial direction of the program? Absolutely, yes. And so, yes, we will put in bids for big names and big voices, and you know, not giving much away, but yes, you're going to see some pretty significant or strong, you know, figures who are relevant to the African story regularly on that program. Absolutely, yes.
So where else are you going to do this launch? If this was a very successful one today.
Yes, yeah.
Where else are you going?
We are going to South Africa. We'll be in Johannesburg, Cape Town, and Durban. We'll be looking to go to Kenya, to Tanzania, to Uganda, Zambia, and Malawi. And don't be surprised, even in Francophone countries like Burkina Faso, there's demand for this program. And we would also be going for
Because they can understand English or because you're going to translate?
I mean, number one, there is a portion of the audience there who understand English, but also maybe in some countries, the people who are aspiring to learn English, knowing that it's an international language as well, and they would want to be identified with the kind of products they know are of international standards, like the BBC's bulletins. I just wanted to touch something on sport, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Komla did mention we've got World Cup qualifiers, we've got the Olympics coming up, and then the Cup of Nations in South Africa.
In South Africa in January, yeah, that's an important one, yeah.
And let's not kid ourselves about this. There are countries in Africa that people sit to watch and want to expect them to do better, and Black Stars are part of that.
Yeah, they're an important part of that.
Look, absolutely. Look, I grew up supporting Black Stars.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. We wanted black, wherever they went, days of Abedi Pele, we wanted to know that Ghana is performing well. And look at what players from particularly West Africa have done for us in Africa. They're the ones who are shaping the English Premiership. And that's why you're seeing almost, let me use the word almost, religious following of the English Premiership in Africa is growing because of our very own talent who've now got an international arena to showcase what they can do. And they're appealing not just to Africans, to people from all over the world.
Yes, absolutely.
China, damn it, absolutely. Yeah.
If you just joined us, you're still watching Good Evening Ghana, and I'm talking to two important Africans from the BBC, and Komla will be bringing to us BBC Focus on Africa on television from the 18th of June at 7 o'clock on Metro TV, and Solomon here is the producer, the editor of that program. So I've been having a chat with them over the last few minutes, if you just join us. My executive producer wanted me, Talal Fatal, he wanted me to talk about personal matters. So I'll be asking Komla about his family. But for you, Solomon, why can't Kenyans play football? I've never understood that. What's the problem with kicking the ball?
The thing is, they're known for running. So
Yeah.
maybe
And they can never play football. They can put the ball in the net.
They run faster than the ball.
So will they
when
stop
run,
playing
maybe
football?
They leave it behind or something. So,
But you have great expectations for Usain Bolt at the Olympics.
of course, Usain Bolt is an icon in terms of athletics. Every Olympics or every generation, you get somebody who defines that particular period. And I think we are in that period where Usain Bolt is the icon of this particular period. Whether he makes it at Olympics or not, we don't know, because there are others who are not just sitting on the
Safa Powell and the
yeah,
rest, yeah.
Safa Powell, they're coming on, and you don't know who will swing a surprise, whether he will develop crumbs and
Yeah,
he
or something.
doesn't finish the
So we
race,
have to
you
be
don't
looking at it.
know. So the thing is, definitely we're looking forward to Olympics. Back to Kenyans and football.
Yes.
The thing is,
So
there's
Kenya will not be at the World Cup, right? They will not be there. There will be 5 African countries that will be at the World Cup. Kenya will never be there.
Somebody save me. Let's finish the Olympics and see how Kenya's doing.
But will Kenya be at the African Cup of Nations?
They're trying very hard. They just drew against Malawi.
At home, I guess.
At home. I don't know what Malawians will do to them when they during the return match.
What's the name of the
Komla, help
Kenyan
me.
national team?
Harambee Stars.
The Harambee Stars.
Yes,
Yeah.
Somebody
I see.
help me. Maybe
Look,
they should change
look.
the name.
Look. I think what is great within the African sports context, and it's something that I've observed. I mean, I was in South Africa covering the World Cup, is that support for African teams and for African individual athletes, it kind of runs across the continent. So even if you know, I've seen Ghanaians watching athletics and rooting for Kenyans. And when the Ghana was playing against Uruguay in that historic match, there were Africans everywhere across the continent
Supporting the
Black Stars. And even till today, when I travel to places like Ethiopia, people want to tell me how they felt when Asamoah Gyan
Oh,
missed
I
the
see.
penalty. Oh, yes. I'm
Oh, I
telling you,
see.
the most obscure places that I have been. I mean, in rural parts of, Malawi, and people are, where are you from? I'm from Ghana, and they say, oh, Asamoah Gyan,
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, and so, whether or not the Harambee Stars, look, we wish them the best of luck. But at the end of the day, there's going to be a very strong representation
of Africa
Africans
in that
and
World Cup.
And
Absolutely,
indeed, Kenyans at the Olympics.
At the Olympics.
Ah,
And
okay.
also
So they've taken the Olympics.
Oh, I mean,
Only the long distance, maybe.
The long distance.
Really not the short distance, yeah.
Yeah, but then again, I'm sure when we get to Nairobi and the tables are turned, and then the interviewer in Kenya is going to say, why can't West Africans run
long distances, yeah.
Yeah, that kind
And
of
that'll be
thing.
difficult for you.
Exactly. But just to say,
it's,
there's a glimmer of hope, because we have at least Kenyans beginning to play at international level. We've got a gentleman called Wanyama who plays for Celtic. You've got
Celtic in Scotland.
Yes, in Scotland. You've got Mariga, who is in Serie A, playing there as well.
Oh, Serie A?
Yeah, they're beginning to make inroads slowly, but not at the level at which Ghanaians and Nigerians
and others, yeah.
Ivorians now following through that. Senegalese started off very well with the likes of El Hadji Diouf.
So there's hope at the end of the tunnel. It's going to come.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I tell you, you know,
Paul is being very smug about
Paul
this.
what Paul does not know is, Paul, the thing is, look here, Paul, the thing is that the things that bring us together as Africans, sport is one of them, culture is a big one. Look at, for example, music. In my house, where I live now with my family in London, you won't believe it that we dance to Ofori and Ponza's music, whether it is Sardine or
But for Ponza, yeah,
yes,
the Ghanaian high life,
exactly.
yeah. We like Rekia.
I was in Arusha,
Tanzania.
yes, for the meetings of the African Development Bank a few weeks ago. And we were in, again, we're just looking for a place to wind down, not the most sophisticated bar, but believe me, when they started playing Sarkodie, and everybody got up.
Oh, I see. The
Everybody,
rapaholic. That's rapaholic.
They knew
They
the
knew
lyrics.
Sarkodie, yeah.
They knew the lyrics. And when they started playing this this Nigerian P-Square, Chop My Money.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it was unbelievable. And you'd think that,
Because
well,
I don't care, that's what it
yeah,
says.
exactly.
Inviting the lady to just blow the cash,
money.
yeah.
You know all about that.
Yes.
Paul. So, you know, as you know, Solomon points out, the things that connect Africa are, it's fascinating because I've been around Africa just, you know, over the past 2 years, you know, more than 300,000 miles, air miles,
Wow.
just to cover the continent. And I think, you know, the continent is just, it continues to fascinate even those of us who come from Africa, but now have the opportunity to, you know, report on the African story. It continues to be such a fascinating
Absolutely.
place. Yeah.
Excellent.
And Africans
Thank you very
are
much,
very
Solomon.
good storytellers,
It's a pleasure.
by the way. With
Yeah.
the local, international, Africans are good storytellers. We need to seize that moment and do the kind of things that we used to do when we were doing rhymes like Cheche Kule.
Cheche Kule, yeah, that one, yeah.
Cheche Kule.
Cheche Kofisa.
Kofisa Langa.
Yeah.
You see those kind of things. We make us as Africans, isn't it? Exactly.
Thank you, Solomon.
Excellent.
I'll look for you when I'm in London next time.
You have-
Congratulations, Komla.
Thanks very
How's
much,
the
Paul.
family?
Family
How's
is very
Kwansuma and the
well.
kids?
They're doing
Excellent.
very well. Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much, Paul.
Cheers.
It's great being on the program. After so many years of friendship, I finally made it onto your show. So
Yeah, excellent. This is the second time, actually. When you came from Harvard, you gave us an interview.
That is true.
Yeah, which
That
is a
is
very
true.
good one,
That is
actually.
true.
You know, when you had just come
I
from
know your
Harvard
ratings must have
back in the
died
day.
at that time, but, you know,
No, it was
I
good.
hope it was much better this time around. Thank you very much, Paul.
Excellent. Thank you, viewers, for watching, and make a date with BBC Focus on Africa from the 18th of June, 7 o'clock on Metro TV. Thanks for watching. Good night.